internet. Today we're going to be talking about agoraphobia and the different theories that explain this psychic phenomenon and the psychoanalytic way of approaching and helping people who suffer from these symptoms. It's been a subscriber's request, so I'm obliging, but please keep in mind that I am by no means a specialist on the question. I just did my research and found the most interesting and I felt relevant points of discussion about it. But if you want to talk about it more, feel free to do it in the comments. You might even add things that I've missed. It's just to say that this is not going to be exhaustive, right? It's going to be like a perspective, and you should take it as such. So, what is agoraphobia? Well, very simply, agora comes from the ancient Greek and meant the public spaces. So, in modern day, what that means is that someone that is afraid to be in a public space. It can be doing the queue to get to somewhere, it can be in a concert, it can be in a supermarket, it can be in a mall, it can be in school, and so on and so forth. So, the definition is very wide-ranging and wide-encompassing. So, what happens often is that the person experiences a deep sense of unease and fear at the idea of being in such places because they are afraid of the uncontrollable nature that people might do things, that things might happen. For example, this is a random example, but I think it's quite telling. For example, people with agoraphobia might be afraid that there might be a terrorist attack, let's say at a concert, so they're not going to go to the concert. They might be afraid that something might go wrong, or they might be embarrassed at the theater, so they're not going to go to the theater, and so on and so forth. Often, how those people cope is that they can have what we call in psychoanalysis a counterphobic object, either go with someone, and that someone becomes responsible and becomes the one that they de facto go to if anything goes wrong, and often they feel very reassured. However, there's a massive problem with this, because the more you cling on someone, the less you can do it by yourself, and the more you're tempted to rely on the other person first and foremost. And it can create a lot of issues, because the other person can feel alienated, they can feel used, they can feel that the relationship is not heading to an equal set, but is like they are like a helper to a patient, and so on and so forth. So being the helping hand comes at a cost both for the patient and for the person that's helping the patient. So fundamentally, it's one of those disorders that is classically referred to CBT, and we psychodynamic therapists or psychoanalysts see less of them because virtually everyone has said that CBT is the de facto cure for them. So just note that that's one of the reasons why I think psychoanalysis doesn't talk about it so much, because we don't get to see them that often as we used to like 50, 60 years ago, right? Right. Anyway, so why are people agoraphobics? Well, that's a very interesting question. And apparently what is virtually common in a lot of people's experiences, there used to be very, very shy children that would not dare to go against their parents' wishes, children that would often fit the mold, and they would fit that mold because the parents were often very scary, very, not necessarily abusive, right, but just like they had such a presence and such an authority that the child was like very scared to go against their will or their judgment. So the child like sticked to the parents' judgment, always trying to find the way to please the parents, and that over-adaptation continued throughout life. And often what has been seen, at least from the psychodynamic perspective, is that there's often been, through those dynamics of the child having to stick to the will of the parents, a lowering of self-esteem, something that they were not able to grow their full personality because they had to adapt to the parent. Adaptation came also at the cost of their aggression. So It might seem strange to say that, but aggression, at least in psychoanalysis, is quite a good trait to have if it's not like physical aggression or if it doesn't hurt others, but because aggression helps you redefine boundaries. It helps you maintain a stable sense of identity because you can like stand up for yourself, fight if you need to fight, or argue if you need to argue. So it's not absolutely not seen as a negative, right? And in terms of those children that have been with very scary parents, what happens is that they have had no space to deploy that aggression that's normal in children, that they're there, they want to fight, they want to have it their way, and they want to like push through, right? That's something that children love to do, and it's very annoying for adults, but it's essential for children to be able to do it, right? So what happens is that they were never able to, because they're too afraid of their parents, to be able to attack and to be able to be aggressive in like an appropriate level, right? And so this has meant that this aggression has not gone, it's just been turned inwards, i.e. it got repressed into the unconscious mind, but it's not gone. So what's going to happen is that aggression in psychodynamics, and if you know about psychodynamics, you know that nothing is really gone, it's going to be pushed out, projected into the external world, i.e. I am not aggressive, it's the external world that's aggressive. Therefore, if I go to public places, other people will be aggressive with me or judgmental with me, when in a way it's the unconscious fear that's still there, and that aggression that they're holding within that can't become conscious, that they're projecting onto others. So please keep in mind that all of these are fairies. They might not quite be true in every clinical situation, or sometimes they might be very limited. I just want to say that I'm not espousing some form of truth, right? I'm really just talking about fairy here, right? Anyway, so what's going to happen is that there's going to be that repression of the anger, and a belief is going to start to form that these individuals feel that their anger, could destroy or hurt others. Therefore, they, even in adulthood, are very resistant to pull from that inner anger and use it. So therefore, it creates a vicious circle in which they fear that something bad might happen, and that they won't have the ability to negotiate with it because they can't stand for themselves because they're afraid. And they're also afraid because perhaps the parent has repressed so very severely any manifestations of anger. Therefore, there's a repeat movement that's occurring in which a child, and now the adult, represses the anger, represses the aggression, and feels that they have no defenses. And in a public space without defenses, they might feel naked around everyone, and that everyone can potentially become aggressive towards them, and they would have no solution. At the most extreme cases, some people can have panic attacks if they are in public spaces, and that panic attack is, at least how I conceive of it and what I've read, is that often panic attacks are deeply meaningful. So they're not enjoyable, like you have the feeling that you're going to die, but they have meaning. At that very moment, you have the feeling that your existence is going to be destroyed, that you cannot live another second, that everything is going to collapse, right? And that's what the person feels, is that all the anger cannot liberate itself. It then becomes anxiety, anguish, and added to that other people are felt as negative or bad. And here it's also very interesting to see that fundamentally, there is in agoraphobia this fear that they cannot escape, that they are in an unescapable process. So here we can see that there are two very interesting things. For example, if we talk about parents, perhaps the scary parent, and I should say that the scary parent is not necessarily a bad parent per se, but there's something that's frightening about the parent. Maybe internally, psychically, the parent might be abusive, but that's another story, and I'm not going to go into it, but it's possible. And that fear of the parent is also the deep fear that no one can come to their help, because the caregiver that's supposed to love them, care for them, and nurture them, and develop their self-esteem while dealing with the aggression, because that's important, like children to be loved and cared for, and as a parent, one needs to tolerate aggression, at least a little bit of it. So, because there's no tolerance of the aggression, there's this fundamental feeling that aggression could destroy others. and therefore it cannot be released. But on the same note, that aggression can't be dealt with of others because there's nothing to deal with it. There's nothing that can stand up, and they also have the feeling that others cannot help them because others are inherently scary. Therefore, they're left alone. If we are to use Bayon's conception, it's as if they lack para-excitation or para-excitation in French, i.e. a level of which the mind can self-contain, can self-soothe. What Bayon, the psychoanalyst and psychiatrist, called the alpha function, i.e. that part of ourselves that is able to give meaning, to reassure, to be able to take care of our scared selves, and to be able to digest or transform what he called the beta elements. So the beta elements are all the negative feelings we have, all of them. They might be more or less extreme, but the beta elements are everything that has in a way gone wrong within the mind. So the alpha function is there and transforms. It delicately takes the beta elements and makes them something else, makes them something that the mind can tolerate and even sometimes better can assimilate and make it something that's going to grow, like a fertilizer. However, in agoraphobia, there is this deep fear that other people won't be there. So there is no digestion of the beta elements. It just stays discomfortable. It just stays terrible until the moment where the person can no longer hold them themselves and the mind collapses because it feels that there is no way out. And that no way out is often something that agoraphobic people talk about and shows that they feel that they are surrounded by people that won't help them, that they are completely helpless in a situation of the collective. Whereas people who have, in a way, been able to free their aggression, but also have received the love and the transformational process, can deal with others. Others are not a threat, not a problem. They can even be part of the group. Whereas people that suffer from agoraphobia might be afraid of the group, might be terrified that the group in the public space might turn against them. So all of these very interesting phenomena I felt were worth talking about, and I thanked the subscriber that asked for them. However, I want to be very clear that it's only a theory, so don't placate it as truth, and also keep in mind that these types of symptoms also sometimes show a deeper emotional problem, or sometimes are deeper rooted. Because here I gave kind of a little superficial, but sometimes it goes much, much deeper. They can be transgenerational problems, they can be repressed trauma, and so on and so forth. So this was the simplified version of it, and the theories I have found. There might be other theories and deepening of the theory. Also, and I want to say this, it does not apply to every single individual. Everyone is very unique, and in the comments under the person that asked for this, there was someone that said that, well, no, you can't analyze a symptom or a mental illness and give a generality. And that's a risk, because yes, you can't say this is for sure, but it's a bit like a map, right? You don't know the specific details, but you know that there's something in that area. And sometimes the map is completely off, right? So the map is useful and is necessary, but yes, the person that commented that was completely right. You have to be very careful. You can't just generalize everything and say this is this and this is that. And to help, and to finish on this note, to help people with agoraphobia is to show them that the analyst or the therapist is there. He's there regularly, and he's there as a support, as a mental support. There will be no judgment. There will be no, how can I say, pushing them to do things. What's going to happen is that they're going to be able to develop a good transference to the therapist and understand that they can then build that part of themselves that's self-soothing, that alpha function, if we were to go for Bayon, or para-excitation if we go into Freud's theory, the idea that something in ourselves can self-contain us, even in moments of anxiety. That's what we aim in psychotherapy, is to try and build that stabilizing ground. For example, a patient that might be very anxious will, with the help of therapy, be able to grow a bond, to understand, of course, but also to emotionally relive certain experiences in the safety of the counseling practice. It will give them the ability to then manage it in the outside world. And here it's very individual to individual. There's no like grand rule. But what you have to understand is that in the cases of phobia, I think it's important to, of course, try and understand the phobia, but also to be able to give a form of reassurance that the therapist might sometimes use a metaphor, or sometimes even the psychoanalysts can use CBT methods to try and contain things. I don't think that it should be either or, right? If it's useful, it's worth using, right? So that's one of the approaches that one can use to help these people. And that's pretty much it. So if you, as I said earlier, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If there's anything you felt that I missed, also leave it in the comments, and we can have a nice and interesting discussion. I'll see you in the next one.